All right, so we need to draw for the order of go for the group presentations, which will start on Thursday. And there are 3 days, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna do 2, 1, and 2. So April 4th, April 9th, and April 11th. So in random order, I have randomly selected the groups to come up and draw. So Superfly, one representative from Superfly. Is that you don't know your group name by now? Like, this is sort of bad. All right, so what number did you draw? Lucky number 5, so you are gonna be on April 11th. Aren't you happy about that? All right, creative communicators. Number 3, so you will be on April 9th, for creative communicators. All right, Fortis. Number 4, so you will be on April 11th.
So are these due on the day that we present them or today?
No, they're due today, but, so everybody is that way everybody's fair, but the drawing is, for the presentation is random. All right, so the Breakfast Club. How many members of your group are here? Huh? 3. Yep. So you get to go first. Lucky you.
What is that? Is that Thursday?
That's Thursday. And let's see, the Formidable Sellers. The last one. I think they're gonna be on Thursday as well.
Fantastic.
It was number 2, yeah, okay. All right, so Superfly is 411. Creative communicator is 409. Fortis is 411. The Breakfast Club is 4-4 and 4-4. So I got those down. All right. So we need to talk about services and maybe get into price today, and that will get us all caught up. We'll be where we need to be. If not, we should have time on April 11th, because I think that the presentations will take the entire hour to get caught up. So there will be opportunities for bonus points today for answering individual questions, particularly with regard to services. There we go. So services marketing. Services are enormously important in our economy today. That is where we are in terms of our development. We are really a post-industrial economy. And what that means is that during the Industrial Revolution and the industrialization of the United States, the vast majority of the wealth in this country was actually in providing tangible goods. We've moved beyond that, and we are now in a services economy where the vast majority of our economic growth is going to be in the services sector. So services are intangible benefits that organizations provide to satisfy customers' needs in exchange for money or something else of value. Mary Jo Bittner argues that all goods are really services. So this is where you can win bonus points. If you can make an argument that some good is not really a service. And what do we mean by all goods are really services? That's what she argues, that all goods are really services. So if you think about your Mac books there, or laptops, what is it that you value about that laptop or your MacBook? It's not the thing itself, is it?
You can have literally everything on it in your backpack. Basically every file that you have or portable. Do whatever you want.
Okay, so you can totally have everything that you need in terms of school or work right there in that device. All of your files. Right there. So you're not like Gollum in Lord of the Rings. Mr. Four. This will go on the third exam. Looking at the Mac, now Steve Jobs did care about the design of his computers. And the first Apple computers that were marketed, the Apple II actually, he had the designers of that sign their names, and that was actually on the inside of the case of the computer itself. And everybody said, Steve, nobody's gonna look at that. Why do you care that you have all of the designers sign their names? And he said, somebody will. Somebody will take it apart and they'll look at it. And so he viewed it as something more than just this product that people were going to find a utilitarian value. Yeah. And to this day, if you look at the Apple designs, I mean, they really are, I mean, your Apple laptop is, your Mac laptop actually is kind of pretty. I mean, they're sleek. It's got this logo that lights up on the back of it. It's kind of pretty. So is there something that you can think of that we value in and of itself, like Gollum in Lord of the Rings, my precious, right? He's got this ring that he thinks is, you know, valuable in and of itself. He cherishes. Does in the movies, and you first see it years and years and years ago in The Hobbit, which was an animated cartoon some of you may have seen movie. And there's this character. Does he wear the ring? No, he just does what with the ring?
Idolizing.
He just idolizes the ring. He just looks at the ring. He doesn't wear it. And in fact, wearing it turns out to be really a bad thing, right? He just idolizes the ring. Is there anything that you can think of that we value in and of itself and not for the utility that it provides? So when you go over to the food court after this class, because this is an 8 a.m. class and it's really early and you're probably starving, and I know based on the times that you all roll up on in here that you didn't get up more than probably right before this class. Mr. Rhodes came in with his hair wet. I take it he just jumped in the shower right before class and just, bounced on up in here. Because you weren't like me up at 5 a.m. And you go over to the food court because you're starving to death. And you buy, I don't know, some breakfast sandwich over there. Or God help you, Chick-fil-A or something like that. Chick-fil-A is another tool of the devil, by the way. Starbucks and Chick-fil-A, tools of the devil. What do you mean tools of the devil? Those are the two big ones. You don't value that sandwich, the Chick-fil-A sandwich, for itself. You value it for what it does for you, which is what? Yeah, it satisfies your hunger. That's what you value it for. It's a service that it's providing. It's not, by the way, Chick-fil-A is horrible. I mean, it's not at all, like the nutritional value in it is not great. But is there something that you value in and of itself? Yeah.
Makeup?
Makeup.
Yeah.
That's a service, isn't it?
No,
You don't
the
value-
actual,
You value the makeup for itself. You sit there and look at the makeup. Really? Yes.
Signed basketball jersey.
A signed basketball jersey. You think you value that for itself and not for what it does.
Yeah, because it hangs up on your wall, and that's the first thing that someone sees if they walk in.
Oh, so you value it not for the thing itself, but for what it's, the prestige of having this, like you can, when you invite your friends to your crib, to try and use your vernacular, you look at it and think, this is awesome, and it says something about you, and you value it, I think, for the service, which is, this is cool, right? Or it's, I guess, what is the word that you all use now for cool? It's cool is like my parents' generation, so it's so clutch. We're really going, okay, yes.
What about your Beanie Baby?
The Beanie Baby. I don't know. I think I value the Beanie Baby for the price that it made. The Princess Diana Beanie Baby, for the price that it may bring. And give me the money to do something else. But I think you're getting closer.
What about like animal mounts? Like you mount your deer on your wall.
Okay. Don't you value that for? I mean, it's kind of creepy. The great hunter went out and shot this poor defenseless animal.
Well, that's just how they look at it. So, if
But
that's
you want people to see it, right? You don't
Yeah.
like hide it away. You mount it up there and you want people to see it. Yes, Mr. Rhodes.
Participation trophy?
A participation trophy, you value that for itself.
or,
Yeah.
I was gonna say haircut, but
A haircut, which you got recently.
yeah,
You value that for the thing itself. A haircut is a service in and of itself.
yeah, but it doesn't necessarily make you like feel better or make you look better. It just makes you feel better. Makes you feel good about yourself.
You don't think it
Yeah,
makes
it
you?
makes you look
Uh,
good.
I said it doesn't necessarily
I
have.
think it does make you look better.
Yeah.
I can argue.
Or the flowers.
Flowers, you value them for, maybe, that's a good one. I hadn't thought of flowers. Yeah,
It'll make
you
the
value
house
that,
smell good. The house would smell good.
One of the things that's interesting is that they've hybridized roses so much that they don't actually smell very much anymore. They're kind of pretty, right? So we're past Valentine's Day, which is, the biggest flower buying day. What do you buy flowers for on Valentine's Day?
Significant
Your insignificant other?
other.
Insignificant other, right? So that you can, I don't know, continue to, I don't know, have companionship. And more. Anything else that you think you can value for, you don't value your hoodie for itself, but for what it does. It was cold this morning, which is why I'm wearing a sweater. I was freezing this morning when I got up at 5 a.m. So I don't value this thing in and of itself, but I value the service it provides, which is it keeps me warm on a cold day. Anything else that you can think of? Yes.
What about like a painting, like a sculpture?
That is the one that I can think of, that I think people value art for its own sake. Not, I mean, you look at the art and you value it for itself, not necessarily for what it does. Particularly because art is so subjective that what one person thinks is great art, another might think is trash, and so it's not necessarily. I think that is the $1 million answer. What else?
Would you say life?
Life. You value life for itself. Yeah, I think that's true. In Candide, which is a book that was written by Voltaire. By the way, Voltaire was not his real name. He chose his own name. He hated his family, so he broke with them fairly violently and chose his own name. His given name, or his birth name, was Francois-Marie Arouet. And Candide is not really a novel as such. It's sort of an anti-novel. There's a unifying theme in Candide, which is there are 3 gardens. The first garden is sort of a garden of paradise. It's in Bavaria, in the barony of the Baron of Thunder Tantronx. And Candide is living in this castle. We're told that it's so wonderful that it actually has a couple of windows and a door. And he falls in love with the Baron's daughter, and he comes to know her in a biblical sense, in a carnal way, and he gets kicked out of that first garden, this Garden of Eden. And he spends the rest of the book trying to get back with his beloved Cunigund, which is actually in German kind of a racy name. And along the way, he has all of these adventures. At one point, Candide goes to El Dorado, where the gold is so plentiful that they just leave it lying around. And he loads up a couple of mules, hauls off all this gold. And one of the people he meets is this old woman who turns out she's the daughter of a pope. Well, popes aren't supposed to have daughters, and she's ugly and horrible. And she tells her story, and they start talking. And he says, well, you can't have had a worse life than I have. And she said, if you saw my rear end, you wouldn't speak so. She was captured by a group of sailors, pirates, and they cut off one of her butt cheeks in order to survive. They ate it. So she went through life with half a bottom, became wretched and ugly, and was enslaved. And her nose touches her chin at the point that Candide meets her. And she says, but through all of this, and as horrible as I've become, I cling to life. Very few people actually commit suicide. They don't throw this off. So maybe life is something that we cling to for its own sake. Because as horrible as it can be, and as miserable as our existences can get, very few people, even in the most abhorrent of conditions, choose to end their life. So maybe life is one of those things that we do value for its own sake. So services are important, and the products that we use as services are important. It accounts for 46% of US GDP. And that figure is increasing. It continues to increase. So legal services, financial services, banking, all of those things are where the real value is in our economy. It's increased in value 100% since 1990, and the value of services continues to grow and increase in our importance in the American economy. $722 billion of services were exported in 2014 alone, and that amounts to a trade surplus. We have a trade deficit in many instances. President Trump is saying what? What's he gonna do now with regard to trade? As a result of the fact that he's not getting his border wall, and even if he was getting his border wall, it would, I mean, how, is this border wall going to be built in, even if he, let's suppose for a minute that he gets reelected in 2020. Is that border wall, so he'll serve until 2024, when there will be another election. He'll actually go into 2025, because presidents are sworn in January of the year following the election, which is the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. That's the formula. So it may actually be the second Tuesday from time to time. Presidential elections are actually the second Tuesday of November, because they're the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. That's the formula. So let's suppose he gets elected in 2020 and serves until 2025. Is that border wall going to be built from sea to shining sea in the remaining time he has in office, assuming that he gets reelected? The answer is no, right? I mean, we're not going to build. There's a lot of challenges. Even if Congress, even if the Democrats, threw up their hands and said, "We've seen the light. He's right. We need this border wall to protect us from the hordes of people that are just, coming across the southern border," which there aren't, by the way. I mean, border crossings are down every year. It's not going to be built in the amount of time he has left, because what do you have to do? Well, there's a whole lot of land on that southern border that is not owned by the government. And you're going to have to do what? Well, you're going to have to get those landowners to give up their land to build your border wall. And a bunch of them don't want to give up their land for that border wall. They're farmers and ranchers, and it's going to affect their ability to continue to, graze their cattle or grow their crops. And they're not going to want to give up their property. That's the funny thing about Americans, is we are really, really adamant about property rights, more so than other nations in the world. I was a foreign exchange student in Germany, and I used to ask my students when I taught American national government to write a paper called My American Dream. And the reason I did this was because they couldn't plagiarize My American Dream. Rather than having them write a traditional research paper where you can get people, you can pay people to write your research paper right now. You can go online and get, download for money research. You can probably find ones for free out there online, which is why we have turnedin.com, but it's not perfect. And it's hard for me to tell, maybe, whether or not you wrote this research paper yourself. But the one thing I knew, and I started asking them to do this before the internet was widely available. I've been here for 25 long-suffering years teaching. And you can't plagiarize My American Dream. And the reason I tell you this story is because there was a consistency in the papers of My American Dream. First of all, the American dream is something that is really unique to America. Nobody says, for example, in Germany, "My German dream." They don't. I mean, they just don't have this same concept that we do. But one of the things that was consistent throughout these papers, what do you think it was that's part of My American Dream? Yeah.
Like a lot of space and land, like a freedom.
A lot of space and land. Everybody wants to have their own, they want to buy property and they want to have their own little plot of dirt. And in theory, when you buy that in the United States, you own all, in theory, all the way to the center of the earth and all the way to the heavens. Now, probably you don't. In many instances, what's underneath that dirt has been severed. Property rights are like a little bundle of sticks, and you can take out one stick and still have some. So you may have severed or people before you may have severed the mineral rights. Lots of people own mineral rights, which is what's below the surface and not what's on the surface. But in theory, you own all the way to the center of the earth. And this was part of the American dream, was to own property and to own a home. When I was a foreign exchange student in Germany, lots of people, it's a small country, not a lot of land, housing is expensive, and most people don't actually own their own home, they rent. The only place that you find that common in the United States, where people don't say my goal is to own a home, is in places like New York City, where they'll rent for their entire lives. Get a rent-controlled apartment. People die. They move into their, and they don't tell the landlord that great Aunt Tilly has died because it's rent-controlled, and they don't want the rent to go up. Aunt Tilly's dead, the rent can raise. But for the most part, particularly in places like Oklahoma, where if you just go a few miles north of here, not even very far, you're out in the country. And land is cheap. You can buy land here in Oklahoma, 5 miles north of Edmond, for $2,000 an acre. And you can go down and finance your life away at the mobile home dealer and get you a double wide and plop it down on that acre of land, and you can raise rabbits or whatever it is that your little heart desires. You know, a little acre of land, you can put cows out there, horses, you and your double wide, right? Or if you're really classy, you can stick build a house. But this is part of the American psyche. The American culture is this idea of the American dream. And it's really sort of unique to us. And those aspects of the American dream, what is it that you value about your house? Again, it's not the house itself. What is it that you value about the house? Well, it provides a place to keep you warm in the winter and cool in the summer with air conditioning. And it says something to people about you, doesn't it? It says something about your personality, the house you buy, and the style of house that you have. So it's enormously important. Services are enormously important, and they continue to be an increasingly important part of our economy. We talk about the 4 P's of marketing: product, price, place, and promotion. With services, we talk about the 4 I's: intangibility, inconsistency, inseparability, and inventory. And the challenges that these present in marketing services, in providing services. So what is intangibility? Well, services, for the most part, can't be held, touched, or seen before the purchase decision. Now, if we take that products are all really services, the breakfast sandwich you buy over in the food court, or the salad or whatever it is that you want to eat, you have some idea of it before you eat it. But a lot of services you can't evaluate before you purchase them, right? They tend to be performance. So one of the things that I've got here is a slide from a website that talks about massage therapy. How many of you have gone and gotten a massage at some point in your life? Couple of you. The rest of you are antisocial and don't like to be touched. That is kind of creepy thinking about it, isn't it? Somebody else touching you all over. Ugh. I'll never forget one, although my mother is Jewish, she just loves Christmas. Half of my family are Christians and the other half are Jews. I'm a Jew. My brother chose to be, my father is Roman Catholic, my mother's Jewish. I always say the Jews invented guilt and the Catholics perfected it. So, like I've got lots of guilt. My mother loves the holiday season. She loves Christmas, even though she's Jewish. And she spends, and my sister-in-law, my brother, chose to be Catholic, and then he married a Jewish girl. And she loves Christmas too, which is sort of odd. So every Christmas they would go out shopping, and my brother and I are along to serve as pack mules for the women folk in our family who are looking for that perfect gift for everybody on the list, right? And we were at the mall and we're exhausted. It's been like a long day of shopping, and they've gone off to buy more stuff for somebody else. And there's these people out in the middle of the mall that are giving massages. And I thought, my brother and I thought, well, that's a good idea. We'll get a massage. We're carrying these bags like through the mall and tired. And that was the worst massage I couldn't wait for it to end. I don't know what the guy was doing, but he's like digging his elbow into my, and it was just awful. I couldn't evaluate that before I got the massage. He looked like a nice enough person, and he was a sadist. It was like a little torture chamber, And the more I was like practically screaming, the more he like was digging in. And so you can't evaluate them before you purchase them. And then how do you evaluate them? So for example, I always use myself as an example. How should we evaluate a lawyer? How do you choose a lawyer? What are you going to evaluate the lawyer on?
The amount of cases they want.
That's what students always say. Some of the dumbest people in my law school class have great win-loss ratios. They're stupid. Like, they are so stupid, they should be examples for natural deselection.
Okay.
Right? I mean, they're just pathetically dumb. When I went to law school, tuition alone, not including fees, at Oklahoma City University, I was teaching here full-time and working in the office of the legal counsel. Tuition alone was $900 a credited hour, not including fees, at Oklahoma City University. You think you all pay a lot in tuition, $900 a credited hour. And then there were fees on top of that. And then you had to buy books. That was expensive. And there were these people that went to work as district attorneys or assistant district attorneys, ADAs. If you can't figure out, now they have great win-loss ratios. Why? Because the people they're going up against are dumber than them. They're called criminals. and they're dumb. And they have great win-loss. I mean, if you don't have a 95 or 96% win rate in Oklahoma or Texas, we're fascinated by crime in this state. And if you don't have a huge district attorneys are elected, right? And ADAs are appointed by this elected person. If they don't have a good win-loss ratio, what happens to the DA at the next election? He's out of work. What does an ADA make in Oklahoma? $45,000 a year. Now, if you are so stupid that you can't figure out that you can't afford to take that job, and they did, and live a decent lifestyle, $45,000 a year, you cannot afford to go to law school and pay the debt service on that degree, because almost everybody has to go into debt to go to law school. At $900 an hour, very few people can afford to pay for it on their own. And if you can't figure out that you can't pay the debt on that and live, I mean, what's the American dream? Own land, own a home. You go to work for the ADA, as an ADA in Oklahoma County, and you ain't gonna be buying no home if you paid $900. I mean, they're stupid. Morons. The dumbest kids in my class. But they have a great win-loss ratio. On the other hand, the drug dealers hire big lawyers that cost a lot of money, and those guys don't have very good win-loss ratios. And I would submit to you that they're better lawyers than the DAs on the other side. If you can afford to pay, which most of you, by the way, if you get into trouble with the law, can't afford to pay for a lawyer for what it would cost. I bill for my legal practice at $375 an hour. You know what it takes to prep for a trial and go to trial in a major criminal case?
50 plus hours.
It's gonna take more than that. The average cost, if you build it at $375 an hour, is gonna be between $150,000 and $200,000, and that's just to get you to trial. Anybody got that amount of money just lying around? And yet those are better lawyers, and they have horrible win-loss ratios. Why? Well, because criminals, even ones that have money because they're selling drugs, are stupid. If they were bright, they would be doing something else. They would have figured out that marketing professor is a much better job. Nobody's running in here to arrest me. I get to talk about what I want to talk about, and I make 6 figures a year. But they're idiots, right? So how do you evaluate? So we've got these guys on this one side, the really bright criminal defense, the Johnny Cochrans of the world, Johnny Cochran's really smart, by the way, super smart. Up against, somebody, Marsha Clark, this is from the OJ, you all don't even remember the OJ trial, who was really dumb. I mean, if you want to see how dumb she was, how pathetically stupid, listen to her closing arguments. You can find these on YouTube.
On Netflix.
Yeah, I mean, you can find this. This is the closing arguments in the O.J. Simpson case. Did we have a racist cop who lied about being a racist that investigated? Yes, but you should believe him. Did you see with your own eyes the fact that the glove didn't fit? Yes, but we had glove experts to testify that it shrunk, miraculously shrunk. And you should believe that OJ wore that glove. It didn't fit. I mean, it was the most. There's no wonder he got off. Listen to her closing arguments. Moron. Right? But aside from that case, what did that case prove? If you can match the DA dollar for dollar, you're going to get off. You know, they've just got more resources than most people who go into a life of crime have to go for a public defender. The public defender is overworked, underpaid, and has thousands of cases. And so they just they try and get you to take the deal, they try to plea you out. So you can't evaluate these. This is called credence properties, and it's difficult to evaluate. Some of the best doctors, I have a cousin who's a medical doctor, he's a professor at the University of Texas at Austin's medical school, and he does oncology, and his specialty, what he researches, is pancreatic cancer. You're going to evaluate medical services by how many people the doctor saves. My cousin, who's a really bright guy, full professor of medicine, has a horrible death rate. Because I know you all have seen the CTCA commercial with Peggy. I didn't know that anybody survived Peggy. You're not going to survive Peggy. Like, you're not getting out of it. I mean, like, you're dead. Eventually. There are two types of pancreas, but you're going to die. Sorry, Peggy. It's nice that you're still around, but, people die. Pancreatic cancer is almost always fatal. You get it, you're gone. And if you looked at how many people he saved, well, he researches in pancreatic cancer. He has a huge mortality rate in that field. And yet, those doctors are some of the best doctors on the planet. Because they go after the hard questions. So evaluating these things is really, really tough. I had a friend who was getting a divorce and he asked me for advice. I was the legal counsel for the company that he worked for. And so he couldn't ask me to be his lawyer because that would have been a conflict of interest because I represented the company. And so he said, who would you recommend? And I said, well, at that time, the best divorce lawyer in Oklahoma City was a guy named Arnold Fagan, but he couldn't afford Arnold Fagan. And I said, the next best that you can afford is a woman named Anita Sanderson. She's really, really bright. She's got a PhD. And she's like me. She's a Judd Fud. That's what we're called, Judd Fuds, JD, PhD. And he said, I got on Angie's List or something like that. And I looked her up and she has horrible reviews. And I'm like, yeah, because people, when half your crap walks out the door, you're not happy with your lawyer. Most people are not happy with their divorce attorneys. When half your stuff leaves, and it's going to happen, you're generally not happy. And that's not the lawyer's fault. And I said, well, I don't think that the people who wrote reviews on Angie's List or whatever the hell it was are in a position to evaluate an attorney. Because they're looking at results, which is the result is half your crap just walked out the door. Your insignificant other just took it. And nobody's happy. I think I'm in a position to evaluate other attorneys and whether or not they're any good. But it's difficult to evaluate. And how do you evaluate these? It can't be by win-loss. It can't be by, how many patients are saved. Dermatologists have a great saving. Their patients rarely die. As bad as acne is, it doesn't kill you. And they're not the sharpest doctors in the medical profession. Although maybe they're brighter than I give them credit for because they figured out that there's rarely a dermatology issue that requires that you be there after, what they get to work 9 to 5, unlike other doctors, ER docs. That's 24/7. right? So it's difficult to evaluate. Intangibility, inconsistency. It's related, and these are all related to each other. Tangible products can be good or bad, and we can evaluate them. How can I evaluate this sweatshirt that I'm wearing? It's got UCO's logo. I'm just a branding, icon today for UCO with my sweatshirt. How can I evaluate the quality? Well, I've had this sweatshirt actually for about 5 years now. And remarkably, it's not faded. Even though it's been washed, it's not faded. The seams are not coming undone. What else can I evaluate about the quality of the sweatshirt? Whether or not it actually keeps me warm.
The zipper still works.
The zipper still works. You can evaluate that. 5 years later, and the zipper is not given out. My brother had a Patagonia sweater on the boat. He bought a boat, his first boat. I've had lots of boats. My brother's just now figuring that boats are fun. They're great. Just low. He bought a sailboat, 36-foot sailboat. We went out last weekend on the sailboat, and it was cold on Lake Texoma. It was rainy and wet, but we were out there, and he's got this Patagonia sweater on, and I'll be damned, it's a brand new sweater, and the zipper broke. He zipped it up, and it did this thing where it split. Like, that's crap. You can evaluate that, right? You can look at that quality. McDonald's is bad food, but it's consistently bad. That's why people buy it. But services are hard to evaluate. How do you evaluate? You will have the opportunity, probably, I'm tenured now, so not every class. Before I was tenured, every class got the opportunity to evaluate me. Students had the opportunity to do student evaluations. Now, almost nobody does them anymore because they're online. It used to be that we handed these out in class. We'd have somebody come in and proctor, and I would leave the room. And students would just absolutely write horrible things about me. One student said, "You're not funny." Well, yeah, I am. I mean, that's just wrong. You're just wrong. I'm freaking hysterical. This is like, the Grand Gary Comedy Hour. And if you don't recognize it, you're brain dead. One student said, "You have a dry sense of humor." No, I don't. It's wet. Clearly, weren't paying attention in class. One student said, "You're a pompous ass." Well, that's true. Duh. Tell me something I don't know. You can't go get a JD and a PhD and not. I mean, you do that, and you're gonna be pretty arrogant, because those are both miserable experiences that you live through. And so you're probably, you probably have a healthy dose of ego as a result of that. But I can be really funny one day and not so funny the next. It's kind of amazing that I'm as funny today as I am, because everything's blooming and my allergies are going crazy, and I've taken, enough Benadryl that my head is kind of floating off in the clouds. But you can have a great day with a professor, and then you can have bad days. It's inconsistent. Now, I try to be as consistent as I possibly can, but a lot of my colleagues, particularly after they get tenure, stop trying. I'll never forget when I was an undergraduate, I put off taking University of Physical Science until the very end, because I liked biology, because you got to cut crap up, and that was kind of interesting, but physics, that's boring. And I took it from the worst, I'll never forget his name, it's like emblazoned on my mind. His name was L. Whit Marks. And I refer to him as Half-Wit. And he would come into class every day and he could write with both hands. And he would just start on the chalkboard. His little hands would just be going up here at the chalkboard. And it was like he was having his own little math party and he forgot to invite anybody. And he would just go the whole 75 minutes, just like this, just writing on the board with both hands just going. And then at the end of the hour or the end of 75 minutes, he would turn around and he would beam at us like he'd done something. Holy mother of God. Like, he didn't explain, like, I'm sure there was something there, but he didn't invite us to that party. It was horrible. You know? But, you know, I mean, I'm sure he had good days. I just never saw any of them. So, you know, but I can have off days. So the quality, it can be inconsistent from provider to provider. Pricing is difficult to develop because of this inconsistency in many instances. Now, organizations attempt to reduce inconsistency, for example, hotels. The Tower Hotel on Northwest Expressway used to be a Marriott. It's no longer a Marriott. Why is it no longer a Marriott? Because that was a franchised property, and they lost the Marriott franchise because Marriott came in and said, your quality, you're going to have to redo all of this, and they didn't want to do it. Because Marriott has standards, and they didn't want to pay. They didn't want to update. So they lost the Marriott. So we try to standardize things as much as we can with training, but it's still, you know, you can have good days and bad days with everybody. Inseparability. Consumers don't separate the delivery of the service from the person that they interact with. If you have a bad experience with a Mercy doctor, you're probably going to say Mercy's no good because you have this bad experience with a doctor. You tend to project onto the organization the experience that you have. Why is it that Massage Envy, now this is one of the things they do. Why is it that Massage Envy is, anybody like go to Massage Envy? Anybody been to a Massage Envy? No, nobody in here. Massage Envy is the McDonald's of the personal massage industry. And why are they? Because they're standardized. They in order to keep quality, they've standardized the thing, right? And so they want you to have the same experience, whether you go to Massage Envy in Oklahoma City or Las Cruces, New Mexico. So interaction between you and the service provider means that you co-create value together. How do you do this? Well, other than going to the mall and getting a massage by the guy who had like gorilla hands, I'm not one of these people that wants deep tissue massage. I want, like, you know, a pleasant experience. I don't want to be raw. That's the type of massage that's where they walk on your back. It's just awful. How do I create value? Well, when I go to I say things like, for example, I don't want my feet massaged. I'm enormously ticklish. That's not good. That's not, don't touch my feet. That's co-creating value together. Interaction between the service provider is going to be dependent upon the type of service. If you're going to hire a lawyer, you're gonna have to have a lot more interaction between them than you are the dry cleaning service, right? Dry cleaning is a service. There are actual tangible products that are associated with that, but you don't really care about the dry cleaning fluid that they use. What you care about is that your clothes come out and they're pressed and they're starched and they're not. And you don't have to be there and present, but with legal services or medical services or massage, you're going to have to be present for the whole thing, or a big portion of it, right? In order to make sure that you get what you want. Inventory is enormously difficult with regard to services. So for example, I am still a practicing attorney. I cannot, if I have a can of green beans to sell and I own a supermarket, if I don't sell those green beans today, I may sell them when? Tomorrow. But with regard to legal services, what am I doing right now? Well, I'm teaching you, I can never get this hour and 15 minutes back in terms of billing. I cannot bill somebody for this hour and 15 minutes because I'm here teaching you. And once that's over, I've lost it. I can't ever get it back. Unlike green beans, which you may have the opportunity to sell, the inventory costs, if you have idle inventory or idle capacity, you're paying for that and you will never get it back. So the service continuum, most companies are mixed. They're not just one or the other. Lawyers are sort of an exception, medical providers are sort of an exception, but most companies are mixed. When we bought the copier, which is down the hall from us, I'm just fascinated by copiers. I think I've told you all this before. When we bought that copier, that's a mixed thing, right? We're buying a product, but we're also buying service along with that. So when the copier breaks, because they do break frequently, it's amazing how often the copier breaks. They have to send somebody out to, why is it they break so frequently? Again, back in the day when my mother had a real estate office and she had a copy machine, you had to lift the lid of the copy machine. You put one piece of paper down. It didn't collate. No copier at that point did. It didn't collate. It didn't staple. It didn't, duplex the roll sheets for this class. I print them. I send it from this computer here every morning when I get here down to that copier as a printer, and it duplexes it, right? It puts it on two sides so that I save a sheet of paper. They didn't do that. If you wanted to duplex in the good old days when my mother had a real estate company and this copy machine, what did you have to do?
Take it out and put it back in.
Yeah, you had to like print one side of it, then turn the paper over, put it back in the tray, and then copy the next side. Nobody did that. So it duplexes, so that means that it's moving more and they break down a lot. So it's a continuum. We get a service, which is they come out and they fix it when they need to. How do we distinguish between whether or not a company is primarily a product or a service? And this is important from a legal standpoint. So when we talked about environmental scanning, one of the things we talked about was what is the regulatory environment? Well, with regard to services, this becomes important because whether or not you can sue somebody for breach of contract, for example, under the UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code, which by the way has been adopted by all 50 states, depends on whether or not it's primarily a product or primarily a service. If it's a service, you cannot sue under the UCC because the UCC only deals with tangible goods. But as I've said, a lot of products are really services. So, for example, let's say, and this is important because one of the things that you get under the UCC is something called the implied warranty of merchantability. What does that mean? Well, it means that every product that is sold should be manufactured in such a way to be used in the ordinary course for which it is designed. What does that mean? Well, let's take this chair for example. The implied warranty of merchantability says that I could sue for breach of warranty if I sit in this chair and it just falls over and I get injured. Right? Because that's what chairs are manufactured for. They're manufactured to be what? Sat in. They should be reasonably safe for me to sit down and use this chair. If I sat in it like this, and all of a sudden the leg broke, and I hit my head on this podium, I could sue under the UCC with regard to an implied warranty of merchantability. Now, if something is more a service, you don't get that protection under the UCC. So what's an example of this? Well, food is the major example of, is it a service or is it a product? Well, if you buy the food in the grocery store, maybe it's purely a product because you're gonna take it home and you're gonna do what? Cook it. So if you get food poisoning from it, if you get Listeriosis monocytogen as a result, which is a horrible, horrible foodborne pathogen, you can sue everybody in the chain, from the grocer to the producer of that food. What about a restaurant? Is that more product or is it service? Huh? You think it's what? It's a combination, but are you gonna get UCC protection? The implied warranty of merchantability. Is a restaurant more of a service or is it more of a product? This is really close. You think it's a service, why? You said service, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I said service because, I mean, they're responsible for fulfilling the cooking and like the preparation of the food.
Right.
So essentially,
Yeah, what is it that you value about going to a restaurant?
how it turns out.
Okay?
They wait.
And the fact that you didn't have to cook it. That's what you're really valuing, right? Like if you go to a restaurant and you buy the food, you're valuing things like, I didn't have to cook it. I didn't have to, come up with the creative, if you go to Red Pine, and I didn't have to clean up. They come and they take the plate away and I don't have to wash it. Yes, Mr. Moore.
Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, they basically bring you your food, everything you want, and you don't
Right.
have to do it.
And
just
you
sit
don't,
there.
yeah, I think that's more of a service than it is a product. Because what you're really valuing is the convenience of not having to do it yourself. I don't know. Courts could differ as to whether or not it's primarily a core offering of a product versus a service. So how do we classify services? We can classify them based on the method of delivery. Are they people-based? So lawyers, doctors, accountants are obviously people-based services. Or are they equipment-based? What's equipment? Well, electricity is a service that's provided by Edmond Electric in this location, not OG&E, right? But nobody's out here like feeding, electricity into these light bulbs. It's being delivered how?
Wire.
By wire, right? It's being delivered by a product or equipment as opposed to being delivered by an actual person. We can also classify services as for-profit and non-for-profit. So there are lots of services that you use every day that are government-sponsored. UCO is becoming less and less government-sponsored, but still, the university is paid for, and part of the cost of educating you is picked up by the taxpayers of the state of Oklahoma. You drive on roads that are a service that are provided by governments. Police protection is provided by governments. Highways, fire, all of those are provided by government-sponsored or nonprofits. So many services, as I've said, can't be evaluated prior to you purchasing them. So what makes a company successful? Why is Goldman Sachs a enormously successful financial services company? Why is Goldman so successful? Do you guess?
Just word of mouth.
It's just word of mouth? I think it's the fact that they've provided excellent service over the years to their clients. My brother's the vice president for Goldman, so I'm sort of partial, right, to Goldman Sachs. But they provide excellent service. How do they do that? Well, successful companies like Goldman, who's been around for over 100 years, understand the way customers make purchasing decisions. So my brother is a tax attorney for Goldman. His job is to provide services to high net worth individuals. To be my brother's client, you have to be worth $50 million. That's the floor. He doesn't have any client that's only worth $50 million, by the way. His poorest client currently, according to him, poorest client, is worth $575 million. His poorest client. Now, how is it that they get these people to go to Goldman? Well, they understand how wealthy individuals value accounting and tax services. So he's a tax attorney. So what does he do? He does their taxes for them. Which, by the way, most of you were coming up on tax day. What is the deadline to file? How many of you have already filed your income taxes? Quite a few of you. And what did you use? The vast majority of you probably, you did it yourself probably, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you used what? TurboTax. How many of you used TurboTax? A few of you. What did you use? H&R Block. Because H&R Block advertises as well. Right? So you did it yourself. You went to H&R Block. You used H&R Block online?
Yes.
Yeah. I use TurboTax. I tried to get my brother to do my taxes. He's like, I can't do your taxes. You're not working enough. You're way too poor for me to do your taxes. He's like, just get on to it. Just years ago when he started as a tax attorney, I was like, would you do my taxes? He's like, just get on TurboTax. It'll be fine. It's all you deserve right there. You know, that's just what you need. And my taxes are fairly simple to do. Right? So Goldman understands how their customers that are extraordinarily wealthy make purchasing decisions. They know that market. They know their customers. They understand how consumers evaluate those services. They understand that, you know, it's difficult to evaluate, but they understand it. They do analysis of this. And they determine how to differentiate themselves to compete. How does Goldman differentiate? Well, it's a huge company. It's been around for a long time. It's got a good name. It's got a good reputation. And that's their competitive advantage. They provide superior service in the financial services sector. So assessing services quality. What do we need to do to assess services quality? Well, we have to understand what consumers' expectations are and then what their actual experience is. And the difference between experience and expectations can be identified through what's called a gap analysis, where you look at factors like reliability. Why is Southwest one of the highest rated airlines? Southwest doesn't have first class. Although I've been on first class in American and it was not necessarily a pleasant experience. We had to fly, in all of these competitions, I will be going next week to a competition. In all of these competitions that I go to, I always take my mother with me. And there's a variety of reasons that I take my mother. A, she's a female, and I usually have female competitors. So it's safety, you know, so that I'm the Title IX. I used to do Title IX investigations for the university. Don't wanna be accused of that, so it's safe to have, a female coach along, and my mother's great. She's been a salesman all of her life, she understands it, she's great at helping. She's a good, practice buyer for our students, in opposed to just me, so that they get a different perspective. So why is it that Southwest is rated higher than American? So I tell you the story about my mother, because we were going to the Great North Woods in the fall semester, which is in Minnesota. And we were flying Delta. And my mother has this, so it's cold in October in Minnesota. And my mother has this full-length mink coat. And when I bought her ticket, so I pay for her ticket, the school doesn't pay for it, I pay for her ticket. And when I was buying the tickets, I realized that basically she always takes 2 bags. So by the time I paid for baggage, it was like $100 more to get her to go first class, and she gets 2 bags for free, right? So she always takes 2 bags. It's $75 a bag, or it's $35 for the first bag and $75 for the second bag. And by the time you pay for that, I might as well pay for a first class ticket. And so I got her this first class ticket on Delta, and it was a miserable experience for her because she gets on the plane, and in first class they give you actual like glassware instead of a plastic cup. She gets on the plane. I'm backing coach with the students, and we took Dr. Workray with us as well. And my mother's up in first class, and the first thing the stewardess does is say, "Would you like a drink?" And she said, "Yes, I would like a Diet Coke." So they bring her this Diet Coke, and she spills it all over her and her mink coat. And my mother's like, "Can you help me like clean this?" And she's like, "I don't know how to." She's just like, and walks off. It's like, "Well, could you bring me some napkins and some water, to clean this up?" And then she comes back with another Diet Coke, and she's so nervous at this point that she literally breaks the second glass in her hand. So now my mother's got Diet Coke and glass all over her. It's a horrible experience. Why is Southwest a better airline? They're consistent. Their flight attendants actually enjoy their job. They have a good time at it, and they're reliable. Southwest has the biggest reliability rating. They have the best reliability rating of any airline out there. They truly live the brand. They're on time more frequently than other airlines. Why is that? Why is Southwest more reliable? Why are they on time more often? The Southwest airplanes are all the same. They only have one model of airplane. What is that? It's a Boeing 737. What does that mean? Well, when other airlines, if they have a problem, and if you fly a lot, which I do, there are all kinds of things that can cause a plane to be grounded. And they may not be major, you don't think they're major issues. But for example, if certain parts of the galley don't work, they have to have ice and water. If they go out, if their refrigeration goes out, that plane is grounded. That is a mandatory requirement. And so if they can't get that, that plane is grounded. Southwest, because they only fly the 737, means that if one plane is grounded, they can easily swap it out. Whereas Delta flies Canadian regional jets, they fly 737s, they fly Airbus, they have, and it makes it difficult to fix. It also means that Southwest, if they have a plane that has a problem, they have the parts on hand and they can fix it easily. Because they only fly what? 737s. And it's easy to do that. So they're extremely reliable. They're extraordinarily responsive. Those aspects that are tangible should be consistently good, right? What does that mean with regard to things like legal services? There are tangible aspects of the legal service. The paperwork that I draw up, it should, be correct. Assurance, and then finally empathy. showing empathy is enormously important. I'm out of time, and we got these services, we didn't get to price, so we'll pick that up next time. All right, have a good morning. I did pass a roll sheet, it's over here, if you came in late, you can get signed, or you can just make it to you, be sure and sign the roll sheet. If you talked, come up, and I'm gonna give you bonus points. I wrote down some forms already for the third.
I just another.